our first speaker, and who's going to kick this off. So no pressure, Guy. I see that you are on there, which is fantastic. I know you're going to be sharing your screen. If you want, go ahead and do that now while I intro you. So Guy Yasoor, I believe I said that name correct. I really tried. Everyone kills my last name too, so sorry, I know how it feels. This presentation,
great.
Hey, I hear you. Did I do it right?
Yes, you did.
That's awesome. Thank you, Guy. Cool. Oh, and there you are. We could see you. How's it going?
I'm great. Trying to share my screen. Just a second.
Perfect. It's all right. We have 1 minute left. No pressure. 60-second countdown to you sharing your screen. But while you do that, oh, there it is. I see it. This is wonderful. Perfect. So you're going to be really kicking us off today. And I don't know if this happened on purpose, but I went through all this presentations and it has a nice flow to it, which is fantastic. So this is the Threat Hunting Summit. If you didn't catch some of the talks yesterday, or maybe you're new to threat hunting, that's all fine because Guy's going to bring us in, level you up very, very quickly, and kick us off here for a full day of some awesome threat hunting solutions so that we all get better. So without further ado, it's exactly 10:15 Eastern time. Guy, the floor is yours. We will be here chatting and asking questions at the end. Take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, George, for the warm welcome. And hi, everybody. I'm really excited to be here and to open this track. I'm Guy Yasoor. I'm from Hunters. I'm based out of our headquarters in Tel Aviv, Israel. It's afternoon here now. And we also have offices and operations in the US and all over the world, actually. And Hunters is operating in the security operations field. Our mission is basically to help security teams become attack ready by infusing how attackers think and act into an open XDR platform that can help security teams see and stop attacks at the root. And what I'm going to talk about today is basically threat hunting, XDR, extended detection and response, and how those can work together and improve one another. So we'll start with a little bit about me. So I've been working at Hunters for almost 2 years now as a threat hunter and a security researcher. And before that, I was serving in the Israeli Defense Forces for 6 years, working mostly in intelligence and cybersecurity. And in my free time, I enjoy running, cooking, and also traveling, although that wasn't that much of an option because of the pandemic in the last 2 years. So I've been traveling less and mostly working, but that's okay. So our agenda today, we'll start by talking about threat hunting and its importance today. I'm sure you all agree threat hunting is important since you guys are here in the summit. Like most presentations, we'll start by going over the threat hunting lifecycle, and then I'll discuss the existing challenges with threat hunting. I'll then introduce you to XDR, which, like I said before, stands for Extended Detection and Response. And I'll show you a short demo of the Hunters XDR platform with a focus on the threat hunting automation capabilities that the platform offers. We'll then sum everything up, and hopefully we'll have time for some questions. So let's start. So let's talk a bit about the current state of threat hunting. It's probably not that new to most of you, but it is important to set the stage for the rest of our discussion today. So with attacks becoming more frequent and more sophisticated, we all understand that the traditional security tools aren't enough. They won't catch everything, and the threat hunting paradigm specifically is an important aspect of security operations nowadays. And with that understanding, we're seeing that the demand for threat hunting capabilities in organizations, security teams, is getting larger and larger. But the supply of threat hunting, so to speak, is just not enough, because threat hunting is basically just a really hard job, and it requires many different resources and skills. I think it requires both red team skills, like knowledge of attacker methodologies, and also blue team skills, like knowledge of your business and network. And it also just requires a lot of software skills, like context switching and knowing how to work with a lot of different tools. And with the skill shortage that we have in the industry at large, it's really hard for organizations to run a full power threat hunting program in their organization. So when we take a look at the threat hunting lifecycle, like I promised, it seems pretty straightforward and not that complicated, right? We start by grabbing the data, for example, Windows event logs or EDR logs, and put it in a centralized place. Then we form an hypothesis for our hunt over that data. For example, maybe we'd like to hunt over suspicious PowerShell executions in our organization, since we read some reports and understand that it's such a commonly abused tool. We then start investigating all of the leads that came from our hypothesis and from our hunt, and we deep dive into those that turn out to be potential true positives. And lastly, we propagate our conclusions from the hunt to the rest of the SOC. That sounds simple, right? But anyone familiar with threat hunting knows that the actual work is much harder than the theory. And I'm not talking here to the threat hunters in top companies who sometimes have more resources or time. We really all envy you. But for the average threat hunter or security practitioner in a medium-sized company who's trying to improve their security operations workflows, implementing an efficient threat hunting program is really hard. For example, collecting the data can require data engineering resources that aren't always available, and those people aren't always part of the security team. Specifically, EDR logs aren't that easy to ingest at scale. And don't get me started on Windows event logs with all the different formats and methods to collect them. Even if we manage to collect the data successfully, forming an hypothesis requires a lot of expertise in different attack platforms in order to be done efficiently. For example, maybe I'm a Windows expert, but all of my company's workloads in the cloud are Unix-based. And therefore, I have to understand Unix just as well as I understand Windows, because I wouldn't want to focus on the specific domain that I'm most comfortable with. I'd want to focus on the most sensitive assets or the ones most likely to be attacked in my organization. So I have to have a lot of knowledge in different domains. Even if I have a good hypothesis, I have to investigate all of the leads that came out from the hunt. And that can be a really cumbersome job. It's not always easy to perform triage in such a massive scale and to rule out false positives. And it often requires a lot of context switching and jumping from screen to screen, and it can just take a really long time. And if we happen to pass all of the previous phases and actually find out true positives, our organization doesn't always have a mature incident response workflow that we can pass this to. And lastly, even if we manage to do great incident response, it's really hard to pass the feedback and to disseminate our conclusions in the rest of the SOC. It's hard to build a good information flow between the different teams because we're all very burdened and busy, and implementing the conclusions from our hunts in other teams is understandably not always their top priority. So now, after that we set the ground on the current state of threat hunting, which is, in my opinion, less than ideal, let's talk a bit about XDR. So XDR, like I said before, stands for Extended Detection and Response. And you've probably heard the term as it's become pretty popular lately, especially in the past year, with plenty of security vendors jumping on the XDR wagon. But other than being a new security buzzword, what is it actually? So our definition is that it's an emerging set of technologies aimed to collect and automatically correlate data from multiple security and IT sources, unifying them into a single threat detection, investigation, and response platform. Hunters specifically is an open XDR, which means that we don't have any agents or vendor tie-ins. We just join the fun and integrate with your existing security stack. Open XDR also means that we can look at things from the attacker's perspective in a holistic manner and remove silos, which is in many cases the reason why security breaches even happen. So we'll see everything soon in a live demo, but let's do a quick overview of how the Hunters platform works. We start, of course, by ingesting all of your security data, whether it's on-prem data or cloud data, into a unified data lake, removing the friction and heavy lifting that is usually needed to do that in-house. We then have our stream processing detection engine run on all of the data, utilizing our huge library of security analytics. And this detection engine outputs possible threat signals. Those threat signals are investigated, enriched, and correlated. And the final output of our platform includes prioritized alerts, as well as correlated attack stories that the SOC can now consume without alert fatigue and with much more context. So without further ado, I think I'll show you how the platform looks. So this is the main dashboard of the platform. You can see here the different engines that we talked about before. So like I said, we start by ingesting all of the security data into the data lake. You can see here, we have a big library of integrations and we ingest all of that data into one single data lake. Then those signals are ran through our detection engine. That data can run through our detection engine. And we also have a large library of analytics as part of the detection engine. And the signals found are then investigated automatically and also correlated and prioritized. Those signals either become alerts of their own, like we can see here, out of the 3,000 original signals, only 43 are actually alerts that are significant and we recommend going over by themselves. And in addition, all of those signals were correlated as part of our correlation engine into 18 stories that we believe have a high chance of being a true positive attack story. We can see here an example of that. So another thing about those threat signals is that they're all correlated to the MITRE ATT&CK framework and mapped to specific TTPs in the MITRE ATT&CK framework. Each one of the green boxes here is actually a TTP that is covered by one or more analytic at Hunters. And actually, I'm not going to talk any more about that because we're going to talk about it more in another SANS event on October 22nd, if I'm not mistaken. Our VP research in Baraz is going to talk there. So if you're interested to hear more about this, please register to that session. So now, before we move on to the threat hunting portion of the demo, I'd like to address one single, the elephant in the room, basically. Some of you might ask what's the difference between XDR and SIEM. And while I agree there are some similarities, OpenXDR is in many ways, in our opinion, the modern alternative to a SIEM. And many of our customers actually entirely replace their SIEM with Hunters XDR. There are some differentiators. The key differentiators that I see is the fact that XDR removes a lot of the pain of manual tuning that is required in a SIEM, whether it's in the data engineering, the rule tuning, and the overall maintenance. Like we saw, there's a lot of out-of-the-box content that is coming, whether it's the integrations or the analytics or the enrichment capabilities. Another thing is that XDR is also much more focused on delivering high confidence findings and removing the endless chasing after alerts, like we saw in the relatively low number of hot alerts or stories that the platform outputs. And I'd actually be happy to discuss that part more in the Q&A part. But for now, let's not focus on that since we came here to talk mostly about threat hunting. So another fun thing about Hunters is that we actually started not as an XDR, but as an autonomous threat hunting product. Our roots are there and we have a very strong connection with threat hunting, as our own name suggests, right? And we realized that the threat hunting lifecycle and the detection and response workflows are basically not that different, and that our expertise in threat hunting can be leveraged in all other parts of detection and response. And also, our product has an entire section for threat hunting. So let's move on to that. So basically, this is the analytics page. This contains all of the library of analytics that I talked to you before. Some of those analytics are looking for IOCs in the data. Others are actually security alerts from other security products that are also shown at Hunters. But most of those are actually threat hunting signals that are generated as analytics and as leads in our portal. So this is the out-of-the-box library that comes specifically for AWS. You have a library for each one of the main attack surfaces, and there's also the option of generating your own analytics, your own threat hunting queries, so to speak. So we can see that screen here, and actually there's a lot of different configuration options. We won't go over all of them, but I think for our demo, what I wanted to show you is an example of a hunt over bits jobs, which, if someone isn't familiar, is a Windows concept of basically downloading external resources from the internet, or in general doing background downloading, so to speak. And bits jobs and bits admin executables specifically are used a lot in attacks to basically download payloads from the internet in a stealthy manner. And what I wanted to see in our environment is basically all of the executions of bits admin executable. We can actually filter this more afterwards if we see that this is too spammy. But this is our threat hunting query, our original query, and maybe it'll be interesting enough. So like I said, there's a lot of tweaks we can do here. We can also play with the scoring and prioritization and the automatic investigation part. But for the sake of the demo, I want to show you the results of this query already in the portal. So this is the leads page. The leads page is where all of the signals that came out of the analytics that we saw before, including the custom analytics that we generated, all of them will be shown here. And we can see that we have some analytics that cover IOCs, and we have some analytics that are actually native alerts from other security products that hunters also ingests and automatically investigates and prioritizes alongside the other alerts. And also a lot of those are basically alerts that started in with hunting queries over the raw data that hunters comes with out of the box. So our query is right here. This is the bits jobs usage hunting query. And we can see the results here as a grid. We can see that there are basically 14 results. We can see that they occurred on several devices. The target process command line starts the same. We can also see that the binaries were actually executed by several different binaries or processes. So this screen actually gives you, in this case, we don't have that many leads. We only have 14, but the screen can also handle hundreds or thousands of leads that came out, and we can easily slice and dice and filter things and find out what's the actually interesting events and add filters that way. And we can also aggregate things and see that there are 3 different initiating process names that perform this behavior in our environment. And actually all 3 look pretty interesting, but I want to focus on the discovery bat script since it's the most, I don't know, unknown and interesting in my opinion. So we can see all of the different attributes here, but what I want to show you, and that's the interesting part, I think, is that also all of the automatic investigation that I talked about just works out of the box for any hunting query that you add to the portal. So we can click this here and we can see all of the attributes of the lead, also automatic scoring that ran over this hunting query. So in this case, we had a default score of 60, but also because of the prevalence of the command line and because of some attributes in the lead, the score was modified and we ended up with this score. We can also see the specific MITRE TTPs that were related to that lead. And also we can see all of the entities that were part of the lead. So for example, we can look at the discovery bat script because that's, I think, one of the more interesting parts in this lead. And we can see things like the path that it came from, and we can see the command line, and we can see the user that executed it. And we can also see a lot of enrichments, for example, the first time that this hash was executed, which can tell us if this is something more abnormal or more regular in our organization. We can also see network connections. In this case, there weren't any, and a lot of other enrichments. And we can do the same investigation process for any entity that was part of this lead. In this case, we can also look at the domain here. It seems pretty legitimate if we're familiar with GitHub. And to make sure, we can look at the domain identity and see that this is ranked pretty high in the Umbrella 1 million list, which, if someone isn't familiar with this, it's basically a list of the most accessed domains on the internet. So if this is ranked so high, it means that it's probably actually GitHub and not an attacker trying to masquerade their domains. That doesn't mean, by the way, that this lead is legitimate. It just means that the payload was hosted on GitHub. It can still be either benign or malicious. And we can also see here the domain, if it was part of Threat Intelligence IOC feed. We have integration with several IOC feeds. In this case, the domain was obviously not part of any of those feeds. And we can see which other hosts access this and when, and many other enrichments are available out of the box. So I think this is a real interesting part, since, like I mentioned before, a lot of the threat hunting work is actually pivoting from one place to another and reaching things on your own, and having all of this out of the box when you just ask a simple question can be really powerful. Another thing we can do is, actually, if we go back here, we can, once we decide we like this thesis and we think that it's good enough to be a permanent part of the SOC, then we can also add configuration here. We can add documentation, and we can also add alert settings that show that this lead can actually go and be considered an alert that will later be handled in the day-to-day operations of the SOC. And that means that this lead will actually go to the security operations alerts page, which is more of an alert queue for the day-to-day operations of the SOC. It can show, again, all of the leads, their scores, all of the leads that were considered as alerts, their score, their description. You have some collaboration features here, like assignee and status, and commenting. And also, one last thing is that you can see whether those alerts were part of any story, which can really contextualize the alerts and help you save time. So, for example, this alert was part of a story. We can see that the same alert was on the same host. Native detection by a vendor was generated, and also hunters detected a lot of anomalous binary executions on the same host, which probably raises the suspiciousness of this of those leads, and shows a high probability of a real true positive incident. So yeah, we saw here a lot of features that are helpful for threat hunting. We also saw some other features of the product, and obviously there are more features that I didn't have time to show you, since I wanted to focus mainly on threat hunting automation. And I think with that, we can go back to the presentation. So I think in the demo we just saw, again, we could see how having an XDR platform could really help your improve your threat hunting capabilities. I think whether it's an easier data collection to hunt over, or in the existing library of hunting queries, or the ability to get automatic investigation and enrichment on new queries, and obviously the ability to correlate those different hunting leads. Basically, XDR helps contextualize and automate much of the work in your hunts and help you focus on the most interesting parts. And we also saw how applying threat hunting methodologies in an automated way across the different parts of detection and response can radically transform security operations. Since starting from threat hunting, we could then move those hunts, those successful hunts, to other parts of the SOC. And I brought some interesting statistics, in my opinion, to further emphasize the importance of threat hunting automation. This is taken from a report by Cybersecurity Insiders from last year. So as you can see, 63% of respondents said that automating threat hunting could help improve the detection of advanced threats in their environment. 55% said that it could reduce investigation time, and 47% said that it could save time by helping manually correlating events. Those are really interesting statistics, in my opinion. And yeah, I think it's time to wrap up a bit about what we discussed today. So when talking about XDR and threat hunting, I think that the two practices can really benefit one another, and I hope you think that too after the presentation. XDR can be a phenomenal tool for seasoned threat hunters, empowering them with additional tools and context. And it can also be a great tool to introduce threat hunting to more security teams. And at the same time, that threat hunting expertise automation and its encoding into an XDR platform can really benefit better detection and improved security workflows overall. And that's basically it. Yeah, thank you very much for coming to this talk. And George, do we have time for questions?
We do have time for questions, and we've got some good questions up here. The first one came early on, and it was, yeah, I'm going to rephrase it. The answer was, the question's around, is this, like, what are the similarities between an XDR, which is what you showed us, and a SIM? Because I think some people saw it at first and asked, like, hey, is this a SIM? It looks like a SIM. What were some of the differences between XDR and a SIM?
So I think I tried answering that during the presentation as well. So I hope that answered some of it. There are definitely similarities. The main one being that both are aiming to be a centralized place for your SOC and for your data. But I think that they have very different approaches. I think, by the way, SIEM doesn't only focus on threat detection and response, but also on other things like compliance. While XDR is really aiming to improve the detection and response of the security operations teams, whether it's like I said before, whether it's focusing on really small, high fidelity, high confidence leads to follow, instead of the alert fatigue that sometimes is discussed when we talk about SIEM. And also XDR, at least OpenXDR and RXDR, comes with a lot of baked-in knowledge and things out of the box, like both all of the integrations and all of the detection capabilities and enrichment capabilities that I think are less common with traditional SIEMs. So I hope this answers it, and we can definitely discuss this more in depth if someone is interested, or also in the Slack channel.
Awesome. Yeah. So one question in particular around your engine correlation and the differences between a traditional SIM. I think the bringing in and doing the correlation is probably a big differentiator for you all. Can you talk a little bit about that? That was another question that came in.
Yeah, sure. So our correlation engine, I didn't talk about that much because it's a different part of the product that isn't only related to threat hunting, but it's a big part of our product. It's based on a graph database, knowledge graph basically, and that correlation engine basically takes all of the different leads and also a lot of the raw data and puts it in one graph, and then tries to find attack stories and the most high fidelity attack stories inside the data and from the leads. So we have a lot of knowledge baked into that, whether it's the actual leads that come in, whether it's the prioritization between the stories, and also the correlation itself requires a lot of knowledge, and it contains both machine learning capabilities as well as a lot of knowledge and context about each entity and when to connect entities and when not to connect entities. So this is like a whole different discussion, and I think, but it's a big part of our product, and we put a lot of effort into correlation.
Awesome, thank you for that. Another one, and we got some good ones, so we'll go through them because we've got 8 minutes. During the collection of probabilities, can it correlate information and map to vulnerabilities like things in CVE or CWE?
So if the relevant data, I'm not 100% I'm sure I understand the question, but but if the relevant data is related to vulnerabilities, then yeah, we do work with some data that is related to vulnerabilities and to vulnerability scanners as well. And that's part of it. I think that's part of the philosophy of our OpenXDR and OpenXDR in general. We get what you give us, and we try to correlate everything, and we look at what's really what's really important and what's the actual attacks that are going on, and we try to think from an attacker perspective and not only from the products that we know already.
All right. Yeah. So the answer is yes, then, because a vulnerability scanner will find a vulnerability, tag that to a CVE or a CWE, depending on the vulnerability scanner, and it's there. A lot of my experiences on that side of the world. So you answered it spot on. Other questions. I'm not sure if I know this one. If you don't understand, that's fine. We can. The question is, what are the alerts or use cases you observe from Zoom ingest?
That's a very specific question. I have to admit, I'm not 100% sure. By the way, a lot of the data we ingest, we can also give, like we just showed, custom analytics on top of that data. So if a customer has a specific use case related to Zoom, then we enable that for them. But I'm not sure in the specifics of detection in Zoom.
Cool. How about how RTA is different from threat hunting automation in hunters?
Can you repeat that?
How is RTA different from TH automation in hunters? I don't know that one either. I don't know what they mean by RTA, so no worries. What is your audit logging tool for Windows? Is it ETW, or I guess you take from anything, right? Or are you doing anything different?
No, so that's also a very specific question, and I'd be happy to discuss all of them later. Specifically, we integrate with any Windows event logs that bring us the data that we want. So I didn't discuss that in thorough because we didn't have enough time, but our ingestion engine, like the thing that brings all of the data into our data lake, is also a very complex engine based on a lot of big data processing. And basically we can decode anything. And we work with Windows event logs in several different formats. Anything should work as long as all of the data is there and it's parsable, basically.
Got it. Cool. And I'm answering folks here just to get clarification. This one you probably get. How do you compare this to a SOAR tool?
I think, like I said about SIEM, I mean, everything is working in the same space, but not exactly targeting the exact same use cases. So I think SOAR tools nowadays are more focused on do-it-yourself playbooks and stuff like that. We're not trying to replace that or anything. We actually work with a lot of SOARs and we integrate with them as well. Our complex detection and our complex outputs can actually be fed into a SOAR, and then to have actions on top of that, and also some of the security workflows can go there. We're working in the same space. We work together, we integrate, and there are similarities, but also some big differentiators.
Excellent. What about your threat intel sources? Can you talk to us about hunters and what they do for threat intel and how that is used inside of the XDR platform?
Always when we talk about threat intel, I'm not sure what people mean, because I think people mean a lot of different things. There are some people that mean IOCs specifically, and some people that mean more strategic threat intel. But we do both, basically. We both ingest IOCs either from community feeds and also from threat intel platforms, paid ones that customers have, and we integrate and get those. And I think what a lot of those feeds are missing without us is that they don't necessarily have all of the data of the customer. But what we do is basically we take those IOCs and we correlate them with the data with the actual data in the security data lake, and then we can actually find those things and generate leads for those. We also have a very complex scoring system that shows and tries to prioritize those and understand which IOCs are false positives and which ones aren't. But basically, we have full integration with IOCs. And yeah, about other threat intel platforms, then obviously alerts, security alerts that those ingest, we also can ingest them just like we do for every product basically in your security stack.
Awesome. Well, we have a lot of other questions, so please, I will reply to these on Zoom, and if you don't mind, we can ask those on Slack. You are on Slack. I saw you already said hi, so please do that, because now I'm even having to scroll, which is great. Lots of good questions. I'll leave the final question of where can this be downloaded and where can they go to get more information about Hunters. I'm guessing it's hunters.ai, right?
Exactly, like you see on our screen. Then you can feel free to check out our website and contact us on any of the social networks or on the website. And yeah, definitely I'll be available in the Slack channel now, and you can, any question you guys have, then feel free to talk to me. Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So much. That was awesome. Really appreciate you kicking this off here today, Guy. Thank you to everyone asking all these amazing questions. I'm like literally scrolling through a bunch of really good questions, especially all the ones that came in right at the last minute. You can post questions as the speaker's speaking. That way I can see them and kind of prioritize them and do that. But of course, we will still answer those questions. We'll send them over to Slack. And again, we are on the 2B solution track, as well as on the solutions-hunters track channel, not track. This is a track, right? So thank you very much, Guy. You can head off or close your camera as I present